Hello everybody and welcome to Vaidya's Chess Hub, and now it is time to do some revision for level 4. So I have no doubt that the level 4 students should be clearly listening to this. They should be making notes, and if the students are quite familiar and know everything that is being discussed here, then you'll be able to face the level 4 exam pretty confidently. So let's get started straight away. Well, the first section that I want to cover is about the study games. At level 4, you have 3 study games, and the way you will be asked in the exam is to write any 2 of those 3 games. However, in this video, I'm going to take you through all the 3 games. It is up to you to choose any 2. You must be able to write the entire game, and not just that, you have to write down the names of the players, the year in which it was played, the opening, the eco, everything. So let's get started. The first game that I'm going to show you, well, I'll bring the notation up later, but first let's see the game. Over here it's a white victory, and the game begins with white playing e4, black played e6, which is the French defense. White played d4, black played d5, knight c3, and bishop e4. So this is the Winawer variation of the French defense. The idea that of behind black playing bishop b4 is that black has pinned this knight, and so now the threat is for the that black wants to take on e4. So let's see now what happened in the game. um, Bishop d3 just to protect the e4 pawn, and then black took on c3, white recaptured, h6, bishop a3. By the way, bishop a3 performs an important role here. This bishop here will stop black from castling. Knight d7, queen e2, pawns exchange, and knight g f6. Now in our previous level revisions you must have noticed that you must write properly. So this move over here is knight g e7, because you would have noticed that both knights could have come onto this f6 square. So knight g f6, please remember. Bishop was dropped back and b6, and it is here that White came up with something absolutely brilliant. If you want to pause the video now, you can pause the video. It is White to play here. See if you can find out the move for yourself. And if you had paused the video, I think you got the move. It is queen takes e6 check. It's just a brilliant sacrifice. Of course, f takes e6 was played. Blocking it with the queen won't help, because then bishop will just take the queen. In fact, queen can just take the queen and it will be checkmate. I beg your pardon. Why will the bishop take the queen? Takes queen will be just checkmate. So that's not even the option. So f takes e6, and now bishop g6 is checkmate. This is just beautiful. This resembles the Bowden checkmate, where both the bishops provide coup de grace, and it's just beautiful. Look at the checkmating pattern, and it's a queen sacrifice. So now I'm going to pull up the notation for you, and I want everybody to understand this, that you have to write down the names of the players. So you can see that the white player is Alexander Alekhine versus Vasek, and this is the French defense, as I've already mentioned, is the Winawer variation. Was played in 1931, and the eco is c15. Now the game goes on for 11 moves, and the last move was bishop g6 checkmate. So if you want, you can pause the video, study this game, and remember that of the 3 games that you have, it's expected that you write 2 of those 3 study games. So now let me just go back and do the game one more time for you. e4, e6, d4, d5, which is the French defense, knight c3. Knight c3 was to protect this pawn on e4, and so black played the move bishop b4, pinning the knight. The idea is that he just renewed the threat of capturing on e4. Then white played bishop d3 to support the pawn. Then black took the knight and bishop a3 to stop the castling. Knight d7, queen e2, pawns were exchanged, knight gf6, and that's how you'd see here in the notation, move number 8, knight gf6, not just knight f6, knight gf6. Bishop was dropped back, and now for the queen sacrifice after black played b6, queen takes e6 check, f takes e6, and bishop g6 is checkmate. Lovely game. I hope you understood the motive behind the openings and study it very well. Let's go on to the next game that we have. And this next game, we are again going to find a white victory. And I'll reveal the names of the players, the notation in a while. Game begins with white playing e4 and black this time plays the Scandinavian defense, which is d5. Very popular, e4 d5 by black. Of course, the best move is to exchange. So e takes d5 and queen takes d5. There's also a line where some players play knight to f6, but this is more popular. Queen takes d5. Black, white played with a tempo, knight c3, attacking the queen, queen a5, d4. Always have a pawn in the center. It's a very nice idea. Black played c6. This c6 move is actually with an intention of providing the queen with access to d8 and also a retreat square, probably on c7 sometimes. Knight f3, bishop f3, pinning the knight. Now this is a relative pin. Remember, in the last game when the bishop was played to b4, it was an absolute pin because that was to the king. This one is a relative pin. Then white played bishop f4, black played e6, h3, questioning the bishop, what do you want to do? Bishop took the knight, queen took back, bishop b4. Now, looks like there's a lot of attack on c3, but not quite, because then bishop and queen attacking the knight, and then pawn and queen also defending the knight. So attack twice and defended twice. Bishop e2, knight d7, a3, and black here castle. So if you're wondering that why did black overlook this, he didn't overlook that. The threat is that if pawn takes bishop, then queen is likely to pick up the rook here. The rook is hanging. So black decided to castle, but as it turns out, white liked it. So white took the bishop. Queen takes rook was a check. King d2, getting out of check and attacking the queen. Queen took the rook, and now comes again a brilliant idea by white. Again, if you want to pause the video, I don't mind it. Go ahead and pause the video to find out what white played over here. And if you had paused the video, I'm sure you came up with this. Queen takes c6 check. So beautiful. Notice this bishop on f4 has covered everything. So b takes c6. And now bishop a6. So if you look at the pattern of both the study games, the checkmate is really very interesting. It's with the bishops and with the queen sacrifice so far. Even in the last game, you must have noticed the similar kind of thing happen. I'm going to pull up the notation here. And the game runs for 14 moves here. So the 14 move bishop a6 is checkmate. So let's get to the game again one more time, and then you can study that. So e4, d5, e takes d5, queen takes d5, knight c3, attacking the queen, queen a5, d4, c6, knight f3, bishop pinning the knight, bishop f4, e6, h3, attacking the bishop, bishop took on f3, queen took back, bishop b4, bishop e2, knight d7, a3, asking the bishop what to do. Black thought, nah, that rook is hanging. So because of this reason, black chose just to castle, which he did. And white said, okay, you're free to take my rooks, but I have a plan. And after king d2, queen takes h1, you have a brilliant sacrifice. Queen takes c6 check, b takes c6, and bishop a6 is checkmate. This is the Scandinavian defense. Look at the names of the players. Canal versus NN. Now NN is not name of the player. NN shows no name. So the name of the black player is not quite known. It's anonymous. And the eco is B01. It's a Scandinavian defense played in 1934. So of course, if you wanted the notation to make notes, study something, you can always pause the video and go through everything one more time. So now let me just close this particular notation pane and let me get to the next game. Now in the next game, it is going to be a black victory, and the game begins with white playing e4 and black responding e5. So it's going to be a center game. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. So this makes it the Spanish game, also known as the Ruy Lopez. Of course, you have studied that. Now black played d5 here. So there's something that black has prepared. Clearly, the more popular one moves are a6, or maybe knight to f6, or maybe knight g e7, or b6 even, but black played d5. So bishop takes c6, b takes c6, and b3 by white. Black took the pawn, attacking the knight. The knight took on e5. Now the knight is threatening to take this pawn on c6. So black played very actively queen g5, attacking the knight and the hanging g2 pawn. Knight took the pawn, queen took on g2, attacking the rook here, notice. So black attacked the rook, and that's important. So white took action immediately, played rook f1. Bishop g4, attacking the queen. Notice the bad position of this queen here. Attacked and supported by the queen. Very nice. So f3, e takes f3, rook f2, attacking the queen. And now you can pause the video to find out what a beautiful finish is unleashed here. Queen g1 check. King has nowhere to go. Rook blocks the check. And f2. It's a checkmate with a pawn. Okay, this is incredible. A checkmate with a pawn is always something special. And f2 is just a beautiful checkmate. And the queen is going to be lost. But of course, it's checkmate. Let's go through the game one more time. But I'll pull up the notation window for you. Here's your notation pane. As we saw, it's a Spanish game, also known as Ruy Lopez, played between Buchter and Floyd in 1979. The eco for this is c60. Of course, the result is 0-1 because black won the game. In the earlier two games, you saw it was the white victory. So e4 by white, and e5 was the reply black offered. Knight f3, knight c6, pretty simple. White attacking the e5 pawn and black defending the pawn. So bishop b5, making it the Spanish, and then d5. Bishop took on c6, b takes c6, b3, d takes e4, knight takes e5, attacking the pawn. Queen g5, it's a double attack. Knight took on c6, queen takes on g2, rook f1, and bishop g4, attacking the queen. The queen has nowhere to go, so f3. Pawn takes pawn, rook f2 attacking the queen, but it leads to disaster as queen g1 check. King has nowhere to go, rook blocks the check, and the pawn delivers the checkmate. It's a game of 11 moves, so anytime you want to pause the video, you can, to study this or to make your notes. Remember, we've studied 3 games, and in the exam you're expected to write any 2 of your choice. Let's end this section here of the study games, and let us now go to something else. You have this particular tactical chapter to study at level 4, interference. So it's very important tactical motive, and let's deal with one example here. It is black to play here, and black has 2 passed pawns, but there's a problem. Well, this pawn, if is promoted, then obviously the rook is a problem. And there's a pawn on h3, of course, that is a big time pass pawn. But then the issue is this bishop on c7 that will take care of that pawn. So black has two pass pawns, but there are problems, and to solve it will for the rescue will come our tactical knowledge of interference. So here black will play a very beautiful move, bishop d6. This is absolutely beautiful, brilliant. Bishop d6 is like a short circuit. So bishop d6, it's just a it just looks such a lame move because that bishop has no support. It just was played to d6. The problem is that if now white takes with the rook, then the rook eclipses this bishop, and the bishop was important to watch this pawn on h2. And the thing is, if white now takes this bishop with his own bishop, well, then the problem is that the bishop eclipses the rook, which was important to look at this particular pawn getting promoted on d1. So that leads to immediate victory, and the pawn, one of the black pawns, will definitely promote. So in the exam, you got to remember that interference is a tactical motive that could be asked. There would be positions, and here in such a position as we saw, bishop d6, it's just beautiful. It just breaks the connection, and whichever way white takes, if bishop takes or even the rook takes, one of the pawns will promote successfully, and black should go on to win the game. Alright, so remember that if it is black to play, the white column will remain blank. So let me pull up the notation here. So notice this, that the white column will remain blank because it is black to play, remember, not white to play, black to play. So bishop d6, and then if rook takes d6, one of the pawns, in this case the pawn will proceed to h2. And you have to write down the variation. So rook takes d6 is one variation. However, over here, if it's bishop takes, then after bishop takes, the pawn on d2 will promote to d1. So you have to write down both the variations. Okay, let us now move to the next position. Here it is white to play, and this is the second position in the interference chapter based on tactics. It is white to play here. Again, you are free to pause the video if you want to find out the answer for yourself. And if you had paused the video, it is white to play and interference tactics. I'm sure you got the answer. It is rook g7. Such a beautiful move, rook g7. Attacking the queen, and the threat is queen takes h7 checkmate. Now, what does black do here? The point is that, yes, there is a bishop. Bishop can take the rook, but it doesn't stop the threat I mentioned. So it's a beautiful interference. The rook interfered and took away the control of the h7 square by the queen. Now, the point is, even if the queen takes it, then, of course, the bishop takes, which is a check. And the point again is that still there could be queen h7 checkmate. So after bishop takes g7 check, there's really no point in continuing because black would have just lost the queen. So the winning move here is rook g7, and after bishop takes is just queen h7 checkmate. So let me pull up the notation for you. Rook g7, bishop takes g7, and queen h7 is checkmate. The second variation is after the first move, rook g7. If the queen takes, then bishop takes g7 check, and after bishop takes or even knight takes, queen h7 is checkmate. Very beautiful, very pretty indeed. Now let's go on to another position in the same chapter. It's white to play here. Again, it's the third position in interference. And here, it's the pawn promotion idea. So your tactical knowledge will help this pawn on d6 promote successfully. So what white does here in this position is that he pushes his pawn to d7. Of course, black will play rook to d4, trying to put this, trying to stop the promotion. And now it is here that white has this idea of interference. Knight d6 is a check. Now notice knight d6 is not checked by knight. Knight d6 check is a discovered check by this rook here on e2. So that's the check I'm talking about. And the point is that yes, the king can take the knight, but then the pawn will promote. And anyway, if the king, well, something else is played, let's say the king moves to f6, well, that wouldn't help at all, because again the pawn will promote and the knight still stays on the board. So I think black will definitely go for king takes d6 and white will promote. So let me bring the notation for you. d7 is the first move. Rook d4 to stop the pawn promotion. Knight d6 check, a beautiful discovered check. King takes d6 and d8 equal to queen, and that will give white the decisive advantage. All right, now let's go to the final position in this chapter on interference. It is white to play, and here again, I don't have to remind this every time, but if you want to pause, you should pause. It's white to play here and use interference to solve this. And if you have paused the video, well, if you had paused, you would come up with the right answer. It is again a rook interference, so rook d8, attacking the queen and cutting the access to the important squares. So here, if queen takes e8, then of course bishop takes e8, game over. And if bishop takes the rook, then believe it or not, bishop g8 is actually checkmate. The knight has beautifully covered the h8 square. Knight is protected by the pawn. The bishop enjoys the support of the rook, of the queen on b3, I beg your pardon. It's a beautiful checkmate. So in the exam, you have to write both the variations. Let me bring up the notation. Rook e8, then if queen takes e8, then bishop takes e8, game over. And after rook e8, if the bishop takes e8, then bishop g8 is checkmate. Remember, in the exam, you have to write down both the variations. Remember to write both the variations. Anyway, the position is fantastic, and that tells you how important interference is. Now that we are done with the interference, let's move to something else. Now there is a lot of theory to study when it comes to level 4, and so here we are going to discuss what are the 5 important sections for you to study. At level 4, in your notes you have a short note about chess clock. So that's the first topic, about the chess clock. It deals with what's the role of the chess clock, where is it placed. So ideally it is placed on the right hand side of the black player. But remember this, that if black is happy with the clock being on the left side, black can choose. But it's the black player that gets a say in it. And because majority of the times black players, well, they're right-handed more than left-handed people, you would find that the clock is placed to the right-hand side of the black player. Then chess clock will also tell you about the time controls, about the difference between the bullet games and the rapid games and the classical games. Next, you will have to study what is an incremental time control, how the seconds are added. There's a short question answer thing for that. Then you have to study what is an hourglass game. Now this is something that in the class you will observe when you would see some games played in that manner using the hourglass, but in your notes you have a question answer format for this. Like, what is an hourglass game? It is when the player who has the move will have his time getting reduced second by second, and at the same time the other player will have the seconds added to his or her clock. So it's a game where the total is always the total remains constant. If 1 second of a player It's reducing here, and 1 second is added to in the clock of the other player. So it's very important to study this. The next question you have is, what is considered as sufficient mating material? Again, you have to study from the notes. Uh, there is enough detail about what is sufficient, what is insufficient, but we are focusing on what is sufficient mating material to force a checkmate from any given position. So you'll find that it's king and a queen, king and a rook, king and two bishops, king, bishop, and a knight, and so on. So the last point is about the general opening principles. See, all masters will tell you that there are a few things which are in common. The objective of the opening. So they are known as the general opening principles. In your level 4 notes, you have them in depth. The way you have to study it is that the first 6 points mentioned in the notes are compulsory to write. From the remaining points, you have to write down 4 additional points. So in all, you have to write 10 points. The first 6 points are compulsory, and from the remaining points, you could write any 4, making the total as 10. So go ahead and use your notes for that. I repeat the topics about the chess clock, what is incremental time control, what is an hourglass game, what is considered as sufficient mating material, and what are the general opening principles. You have to study that from your notes. Please remember that. Let us now proceed to the last section that we have to cover up for level 4. This is the concept of the square of the pawn. This is very important that you pay meticulous attention here, because there is something where all the students, they go wrong. Okay, majority of the students, let's not say all, majority of the students go wrong. The direction in which the pawn is moving. So first let's see what this square of the pawn is. Well, this knowledge will help you quickly find out whether the pawn will promote successfully or whether the opponent king will hunt the pawn down successfully. So look at this position that you have. Now look at the direction of the pawn. That's very important. This pawn is going this way. It's headed to c8 and wants to queen. And there is this king, of course, that you see on h6 that will try to stop the pawn. Now the square of the pawn is drawn in this way. The starting square is the position where the pawn is. Then you draw a diagonal in the direction of the king. So you don't have to go in the other direction. You have to go in the direction where the king is. So that's your diagonal. Then you go to the square for the promotion. And finally, you complete the square on the same rank. So this is how a square of the pawn looks. Pay proper attention to how it was done. And if, the point is that if the king is outside the square, then the pawn will promote successfully. If the king is on the square or in the square, then the pawn will not promote successfully. I repeat, if the king is outside the square, then the pawn will promote successfully. If the king is on the square or in the square, the pawn will not promote successfully. So let us see, using the square, what can we see? That the black king is outside the square. So we can say that this white pawn will promote successfully. Now let us see. So this pawn will move to c6. The black king will try to chase. Let's say why there? Let's say king g7, c7, king f7, and c8 equal to queen. So the pawn was definitely able to promote successfully. So whenever a figure is given to you in the level 4 test, you are supposed to draw a square, what you do is that you draw the square and then you mention it properly about where the king's position is. So I'm going to pull the notation here and read out the line for you. So the black king, I'm reading it out. The black king is outside the square. You can clearly see that the black king is outside the square. The black king is outside the square, so the pawn will promote successfully. Remember this line, you have to write it down properly, suggesting and telling very clearly that you know this concept, the square of the pawn. So mention this line properly. You can pause the video and revisit this if you want to study again. For the moment, let us go on to the next position. Now, in this position, I think it's black to play here. And the thing is, this is where most students go wrong. Remember, I even said all students go wrong because 90 over 90% of the kids go wrong here. The point is they don't look at the direction of the pawn. So this pawn over here is a black pawn and will go this way and will promote at c1 and not the other way. So it's very important that you understand that. So this square will be in something like this. The starting square is c5. Then you draw the diagonal, remember, in the direction of the king. And then you go to the promotion square. And then you complete the square using the same rank, which is the 5th rank. And clearly now here you see that in the king, the opponent king is on the square. And so, remember what I said? If the king is on the square or in the square, the pawn will not promote successfully. Okay, I mean, this is all assuming that there's no king help for the pawn. Remember that. Okay, so in this position, black will try c4, king f2, c3, king e2, c2, king d2, c1 equal to queen, king takes c1. Now remember, the pawn will promote but not successfully. That's why that word successfully is so important. I'll bring the notation and look at the line here. The white, remember, let's go back to this first position and let's draw the square again. This was the square, and we definitely saw that the king was on the square. That's why I look at the line here. The white king is on the square, so the pawn will not promote successfully. You have to mention this line. All the students level 4, pay attention. You have to mention this line. The white king is on the square, so the pawn will not promote successfully. Let's go on to the next position. This is, I think this is again white to play. Yes, let's draw the square. This is, I think this is black to play. So no, it's white to play. So the point is, let's draw the square. The pawn is here. Let's carefully look at the direction. The pawn is not going up. It's a black pawn, so the black pawn is going down from 8 to 1, rather 7 to 1. So in the direction of the king, not the same king, the opponent king. Then the promotion square. Then you complete the square on the same rank, and now the king is on the square. So like the last position, if the king is on the square or in the square, the pawn will not promote successfully. So here again, it's white to play, so there's no chance that black pawn will promote. Let's find out. King c4, black will play f4, king d3, f3, king e3, f2, and king takes f2. So let's get back to the starting position, and I'll bring the notation. Again, we can see that the white king, look at the line here, the white king is on the square, so the pawn will not promote successfully. It's important, two things. One, that you look at the direction in which the pawn is going to draw the correct square, and the next thing is you mention the line, whether the pawn will promote successfully or will not promote successfully. So that's it for now for level 4, and I have no doubt that you have found this very interesting, and prepare very well. Remember to study the theoretical aspects which I've just mentioned, and if you are ready with everything that we just discussed, then you are ready to take on the clearance test for level 4. As usual, as I always say, keep studying, keep learning, keep enjoying. Up until next time, bye bye.